My name is Beth Corelli. I'm Director of Enrollment Communications at the Brown School, and my pronouns are she, her, hers. And I'm super excited about this particular presentation. I'm a huge fan of the work that Lindy Drew does for Humans of St. Louis. And she's a proud Brown School alum. We're very proud of her. So Lindy, if you want to advance the slide, I will just give you a little introduction here, and then I will leave it to you. Okay, so Lindy, as I said, was a MSW MPH 2016 graduate. She is co-founder and lead storyteller of Humans of St. Louis. Many of you may be familiar with Humans of New York or the other Humans of pages. And Humans of St. Louis has really grown and has become one of the most popular Humans of pages around. She co-founded it while she was at the Brown School with some colleagues, and it is a remarkable way to really gain insight into the people of St. Louis, the places, the things that you wouldn't normally see unless you were kind of out on the street investigating. And she really uses her social work and public health lens to tell the story behind the people and places of St. Louis. So super excited to hand it over to her. If you have questions, please feel free to chime in, speak up during the presentation or afterwards. You can put them in the chat, or you can unmute yourself and ask Lindy directly. So thanks so much, Lindy, and welcome.
Well, thank you, Beth, for having me. Hey, everybody. It's really good to be able to see your faces on this one. I wish you could be in person, but I hope you're able to get everything that you need out of the presentation from where you're at. I was talking with Beth earlier in the past week about how something like this would have been really helpful for me to attend. I never did, but orientation was really great, and I have a lot to share with you about that. I'm going to kind of preface this by saying this is just my story going into it. And I remember before school, there were a lot of questions that I had about, am I the right fit for this school? Is this the right program for me? But now that I'm 4 years out of school, I'm going to share with you a little bit about what school was like and what I learned as a result and where I ended up now with this business I started. Hopefully you'll be able to get a little bit of an idea more about St. Louis. And to start all of that, I'm going to give you some background about my story as well. Okay. So if you do have questions, put them in the chat. I might not see them until the end, but we will get to them. Okay. So I'm going to go back as far as when I was an undergrad, I thought I was pre-med. I finished the program. I did the bio degree. It just didn't click. And my last year of school, I ended up taking photo classes. My mom's an artist. She was like, you should really try some photo classes or art classes. So I did, and I fell in love with it. We had a class in our black and white photography program where somebody donated a ton of black and white film. And the only thing that he asked is that we submit at least one photo to a gallery competition. This was in 2000. So I went to school in Arizona at U of A, and I submitted the picture to Tucson at the Millennium. And this was the photo that got chosen. So the class I took was documentary photography. The theme for the project was family. And since my family didn't live there because we were in Phoenix, I chose the family of Harley Davidson riders. And for that summer, I went around and I rode around Tucson, around Mexico, and then put this book together and really decided photography is kind of where my heart is at. So after that, I ended up traveling a bit, and I took my camera with me to South America. And I went down to Chile, and I volunteered for a group home for girls for about 1.5 years. I really wanted to be in a different culture, really change up what I knew. I ended up falling in love with the kids, and I stayed, and they taught me Spanish, and we're in touch to this day, over social media and stuff like that. We did a Kids with Cameras program through Pentax, and I taught the children photography, and we ended up doing a gallery show of their work as well. And when I finished, I kept traveling up the backbone of South America. I worked as a photojournalist for a bit in Costa Rica, and I taught English for a bit in Ecuador. And by the time I came home to Arizona, it was 2008, and it was really hard to find work. But I thought, okay, well, what are the skills that I've gained during all this time? I was bilingual. I learned a lot about Latin American history and culture. And where I'm from, down at the southern border, of course, immigration issues are massive. So I ended up getting a job at this group home for kids called Casa de Sueños, the Dream House. And the Dream House took in kids who were crossing the border, who were unaccompanied, and who were undocumented. And they were from all these countries that I hadn't gone to, like Guatemala, Mexico, El Salvador. The same stories that we're hearing in the news now is where those kids are coming from. And the same kids in cages stories that you're seeing, and children who are being treated unfairly at the border, no matter what the administration has been then or now, is the same story that we saw back then, 2008, even before. I worked with the kids for about 2 years, and I couldn't photograph them because of confidentiality issues. But during that time, it really made me question, what more can I do for this population? And that's what motivated me to think about grad school. So one of the people that I had met down in Chile when I was volunteering happened to come home to the US and go to the Brown School for social work and public health. And it not only was her, but it was actually like 4 volunteers. We established a friendship. I kept in touch with them, and I really learned about the Brown School through their time there. So when it came time for me to apply, I ended up applying. So if I take you through the slide, this is when I had worked at the Dream House in Arizona. A friend of mine and I took 2 weeks off to go to Guatemala to kind of see where the majority of our kids were from that were crossing the border. And when we got there, the first night I was there, we got held up at gunpoint on a bus, getting from the capital to a small city called Antigua. It's like a small colonial town. And they ended up doing a stick up for the whole bus, and they stole my camera. They took my camera body, they took the lens. Luckily, everybody was safe. It was really just a question of these people needed something that they could sell. They got what they could, and they moved on. Luckily, I had a little point and shoot camera with me, like the ones that I was working with in Chile with the girls, a Pentax one. And so these are photos from that little camera, which made me realize you don't need a massive system. It's $3,000 to be able to take photographs, but what you need is something to take photographs. So I came back from that trip, and that also motivated me to go to school. And so I applied to 4 schools, and I got into the Brown School, and it really seemed like the best fit. And I'm about to kind of tell you all why. So while I was there, I decided to go the public health social work route, building on the biology degree, but doing something more social. And a friend who I had met there introduced me to another student who was a year above me. And she always wanted to start a project kind of like Brandon Stanton's Humans of New York. And so in our free time, we got together, we met, we talked about like what could unfold if we did the project, not knowing what we were doing. And we hit the streets. And this is one of the first people that we met. And so we started to ask questions like, where are you going and where are you on your way to? And this guy has like awesome fashion. He's on his bike. I'm always on my bike in St. Louis. And he's like, oh, well, I'm going to the clubhouse. And then he just got on his bike and he left. And we looked at each other like, it seems like an easy project, but how are we really going to make it work? How are we going to get people to confide in us? How are we going to be able to stop them on the street and ask them really intimate questions in hopes of understanding their lives a little bit better, right? So we did the project quietly for like 4 months. And at the end of 4 months, we reserved the social media sites and we decided to launch the page. And that was the first photo that we used to launch it. So I was at my practicum that I think it was like the second semester or something. And after I had finished my work, we launched the site. And the first day we had like 300 followers, the second day, like 600. Our friends knew about it. We didn't really advertise it. And as of today, we have a following of 130,000 followers on Facebook and Instagram. It is a total labor of love doing this project. And so much of being at the Brown School has allowed me to grow the site and also really try to finagle and finesse how to do those interviews and who we've brought on board. So it started off with 2 people, and this is my first year of school, right? I started school in 2013. We launched it like Cinco de Mayo in 2014. Now we're a nonprofit 2 years later after we had discovered it. We have 4 storytellers who work under me as contracted storytellers that I've trained. Many of them are Brown School graduates as well. We have a volunteer editing team of about 6 people. It fluctuates every now and then. We decided to go the nonprofit route. So we have a board of 6 people who help us out with all the decision making that we need to do. And we're also working on our first self-published book publication, which will hopefully come out at the end of this year. It's been quite a project, but again, I'll talk about that more and how the Brown schools help with that. The biggest thing is like our contributors that help aren't just the people on the team, but it's the people who we meet sporadically on the street. And it's the people who end up commenting in the comment section. And for some reason, not knowing when Carolyn and I started this site, it just started to kind of spread like wildfire. And we knew that after a while, there was a need for another platform for conversations. So as I mentioned, we launched like Cinco de Mayo in 2014. And just a few months later, Mike Brown happened in August. We had about 14,000 people on the page. And that's when I started to notice, as like the head storyteller, that the conversations changed. There was a massive need to get into conversations about race, racial equity, about divisions in the city and whatnot. But we tell stories about a little bit of everything. So to give you some examples, these are some of my favorites. I found a 4-leaf clover yesterday. I find 4-leaf clovers all the time. I've never seen one until I met this gentleman. I was like, oh, really? Prove it. And he took it out of his wallet. What do you want to be when you grow up? A surgical doctor, because I want to look in people's bodies and my mom's body to help fix their problems. Is there something you want to fix about your mom? Yeah, breast cancer. She's special. Does she know that you think she's special? She really doesn't. How long have you known her? Over 20 something years. I'm an introvert to my very soul, but I kind of can't see it because I might have to have someone else read it. I'm an introvert to my very soul, but when I believe in something, I try to make my voice heard in my own little way. This took less than 91 seconds. These are the hands of an 8-year-old white girl and a 10-year-old black boy who met on November 29th, 2014 at 9:45 a.m. and they're friends by 9:47. So we end up sharing a story a day on the Humans of St. Louis site. Also, we call it HOSTL, HOSTL. It's kind of like our mnemonic for it. So you'll hear me referring to that as well. The neat thing about meeting strangers in St. Louis, and I wanted to tell you my background before about where I've traveled and where I come from and what's happened to me in the past in foreign countries and different cities, because getting to St. Louis, I really showed up with this mindset of total curiosity. It feels comfortable to walk around, to get on my bike wherever I go and approach people and just say, hey, my name's Lindy. I'm doing this project. Can I take your photograph? And do you have time for an interview? Not everybody says yes. Most people do. Sometimes they're in a hurry and they don't have the time. Sometimes they call me back and they're like, can we do the interview at a later time? Sure, no problem. But you'd be surprised that in the moment, it might be a 5-minute interview. It might be an hour interview on the stoop or in the park or just walking with somebody. And all of a sudden, this one-on-one conversation unfolds. We go ahead and edit that interview down to a paragraph or a one-liner, take their photograph. And a huge part of why Humans of St. Louis has worked is the permissions part, which is something I definitely learned at the Brown School too. So instead of, helicoptering into a community and take what I need, which some journalists could do, some photographers could do, some newswire people can do. So much of what we're doing is a back and forth, right? And if I didn't have that lens from the Brown School for how to approach people and talk to them and massage the interview, it would be a completely different page. And I'll tell you, when we launched Humans of St. Louis, a lady reached out to us and said, we have a private site on Facebook called Humans for Humans. It's all the people who run the Humans Web pages around the world who are, connected to it. And we'd like you to be a part of it. So we're in this constant conversation with people who are from Dublin and Amsterdam and Minneapolis and watching their sites and how they run it, equally successful, but totally different, right? So this is a gentleman that I met whose truck with the XO sign on it, I'd always seen driving from my apartment to school in the mornings. And one time he was finally there. So I parked my car, as you can see over here, and the back of his truck was, lifted up. And I saw these bikes just like shoved in the back. I came over with my camera. I said, hey, I'm really curious to know what your business is about. And he's like one of the best stories because someone like Amos, this guy, he launched right into his story. I didn't have to ask very much. He was just very open. He said, yeah, let me tell you what's up. So one day I was in my car and I went to turn and a girl was crossing the street with her bike and her chain popped and it fell off and I almost hit her. I got out of the car. I helped her fix her bicycle. And I got this idea. What if I bought bikes really cheap from Goodwill and had them donated and I fixed them and then I could sell them to the kids on the block? Like I can't afford a brick and mortar bike shop, but I want to do this. So he ends up doing it. And all these mothers and grandmothers and their kids, they come over to his place by this vacant lot. And they end up buying bikes from him. And that's how he makes a living. And he ends his story by saying, the community loves me. They can't get rid of me. And that's another thing that happens in the interviews where they leave you with this like ... ellipsis. And I'm so curious. I'm like digging for more answers, right? So this idea of asking follow-up questions, which you'll also learn how to interview people, whether it's like for clinical work or whether it's for documentary photography work or whatever. So I said, Amos, why can't the community get rid of you? Like, why are you so special? He's like, well, I told the kids if they bring me their report card and they show me that they get their grades up from a D to a C to a B to an A, they can choose any bike they want for free off of my lot, right? So we ended up sharing that story and this like flood of commentary came in like, thank you, you're a great community member, you're promoting education in your own way in our city. I have extra bikes, can I drop them off? I'd love to help you out during the summer. Do you have internships, So that's like an example of what would happen when a little story from St. Louis kind of goes mini viral and people really want to help this person out. So if I kind of told you what would make a hostel story, you can read through it. These are the things that we're really looking for, right? I can tell you or I can show you. And one part also about the Brown School that I think about often is this difference between like quantitative and qualitative work and data and research and writing, right? I think what feels comfortable about doing a project like Humans of St. Louis is, for me, we're gathering the qualitative. We're hearing straight from someone's mouth. What is it like to be you with your identities, with how you show up, with who you are at this point in time? This is one of the stories I think that's honestly one of my favorites. I met Vera, who's a postal worker, because I was interviewing somebody else. And Vera came out of a 24-hour store on the corner and she's like, hey, what are you doing? She was just super curious as well. So I told her about my site and I said, how's your day going? That was it. And she launched into her story. And she said, I just live day by day, minute by minute, hour by hour. My son was murdered last year. He was shot in the head. He was 24 years old. The only thing we knew is he was driving and he and his fiance were supposed to come to my daughter's dance performance. So she goes on to tell me how her son was with somebody else in the car had flipped, something had happened with an altercation, he got shot. By the time she arrived to our hospital here, Barnes Jewish, and she was called in by the doctor, her son was already gone. And she just remembers not talking to him for a few days because they had been texting on the phone, but they hadn't really like called to check in with each other. And so her drive home point to me in that interview was, you got to look out for the people you love, make sure to check in because you just never know. And we left the interview at that. Well, a few days later, as I was preparing Vera's story, I sent it to her to look over and to give me the thumbs up to share it because it's a wide audience. It's a small town. We want to make sure everyone is okay with what goes out there. She sent me a follow-up story. So before I left Vera that day, she was checking her phone. I saw a picture on the back of it and I made sure to take the photograph of it with her permission. And then this is what she wrote me. A few days after we interviewed Vera from today's earlier post, she wrote us to say that her son was an organ donor and wanted to share this letter from Mid-America Transplant Services that they sent to her. Dear Vera, I wanted to share a little bit about the lives that were changed because of Christopher's generous gift. Christopher's heart now beats for a 64-year-old man who lives in Colorado. Christopher's lungs were gifted to a 58-year-old man from Missouri. He's married and works in heating and cooling. The recipient of Christopher's right kidney is a 48-year-old mother from Missouri who's disabled. Christopher's left kidney was received by a 21-year-old man who lives in Missouri. His liver was gifted to a 55-year-old woman who's married and works at a bank in Wyoming. His gifts have touched the lives of not only his recipients, but also their many family and friends. Even in his death, he managed to bless people he didn't even know, and gave him a second chance at life, right? So that's the difference, which I'm sure you're all feeling in different ways, of what the quantitative is like versus the qualitative. I don't know who Christopher is. I never met him, but I'm friends with Vera online now after this story, and I get to see him every year when she celebrates him. And he's a real person, right? The real story. And she's very much affected by this. Not to mention that the topic that she's talking about is gun violence, which is a huge issue throughout the United States, as we know, and also in the city. The example I gave you early on when I was backpacking for 2 weeks in Guatemala, right? It just so happened that we were held up at gunpoint, something that could happen anywhere, anytime. In St. Louis, I've never had that experience, but I have listened to many stories on the street about this. And that's one topic, you guys. The things that we're hitting on in Humans of St. Louis are whatever these people decide to bring up when I ask them the questions I do. So it might be something about SIDS, sudden infant death syndrome. It might be something about malaria from when someone traveled or lived overseas. It might be something about housing or transportation or education, but we're giving people a chance to talk deeper about these issues. And I will say what you'll get from your education at the Brown School is digging deeper into these, right? And recognizing it's not just one thing, it's a system of things. So when I decided to come to St. Louis, I looked up the city, and I kind of changed this slide in my presentation every now and then. I looked this up yesterday and screenshot it yesterday. This is what Google tells me about St. Louis. This is the, overarching themes of what Google thinks St. Louis is about. Of course, you can do a deeper search. Of course, there's more information here, right? But when I first saw this, it was like St. Louis weather and St. Louis sports. And yes, that's all part of our city as well. But so are people like Vera and people like the little girl who, wants to save her mother for breast cancer. Another in for the work that I do, and the reason I wanted to do Humans of St. Louis in the first place, was the photography. So I am discovering St. Louis a ton through my lens. And it's not just through my camera lens, but I'm constantly discovering the city through like my own lens, right? From where I came from, what my background is, how I relate to others. So when I'm taking the photographs, I'm looking for color, I'm looking for symmetry, I'm looking for distinct locations in St. Louis. This is Art Hill, if you know it, by the St. Louis Art Museum. I'm looking for arch imagery, like here on Antoine's hat. We farm on the weekends. And I'm also looking for details. When I met Alex, he was up on the north side. There was nobody really talking to him. And it made him a wonderful subject to walk up to because he was available. And I talked to Alex for like 30 minutes. And the last question I asked him was, is there anything else I should be asking you? I don't know about you. He's like, you didn't ask me about my book. How was I going to know that you wrote a book? So this is another one of my favorite stories because he pulls out this notebook and he's been writing his story for, X amount of years. You look at the bottom of the page on the right side, it's like, it says page 1. But when you flip through his book, he's filled the whole notebook, right? And you can see there's like watermarks here and he's crossed out 2014. He's like still going into 2015. And the first line of his story is, every day the world's getting rougher and rougher and people have struggled to find jobs. Jobs are harder to find nowadays and people have to work to make a living. So from this story and this photograph, you can't really see who Alex is. You're kind of learning. You don't know if Alex is male or female. You don't know where Alex is from, what they look like. And when I back up with my lens to zoom out, this is the person that I approached. standing next to Alex, I couldn't be, any more different than him. The cool part about Alex is he was willing to have a conversation with a stranger and tell his story. So I asked him a very humanizing question. What's your biggest need? What's your biggest need? There's so much going on in St. Louis. I could have asked him anything. He said, I need a job. And I said, well, what do you do? And he goes, I can sell tickets to sports games. I can park cars. I can all of these things, right? And I'm sitting there learning as I'm listening about what my preconceived notions might be and how he's completely blowing my stereotype like out of the water. We went to go ahead and craft the story. We shared it on the page. And as the comments came in, it was, hey, Alex, this organization is hiring. Give them a call. Hey, Alex, can you send in your resume here? Hey, how do I get in touch with Alex, right? So it's this idea of connecting people as well, while you're also trying to dismantle stereotypes of who people are in St. Louis and what people think people are about in St. Louis. So these are the typical questions that I'm asking on the street. You guys can read them as you go. But really what's helped craft these is studying, Humans of New York and the other sites, but also going to my classes the first year where you need to talk and practice one about what does it mean to ask an open-ended question? And how do you interview someone to be able to pull information out from them, but also make them feel comfortable while you're doing it? So these are some of the skills that we've gotten to practice. And we've come a lot farther than the first time when we met that guy on his bike who's like, I'm going to the clubhouse, peace out. The biggest thing that helps with when I question people on the street are these follow-up questions. So when they answer, I do my best to not make the story about me and I make it about them. So I'm asking, how did that happen? Why do you think that happened? Can you tell me more about that story, right? I'm completely open if someone has questions for me, but I also realize when I go out to work, I have that social work hat on, that public health practitioner hat on. I'm looking to craft a story. I'm looking to give that person a one-on-one experience so they feel like they're included in this as well, and that we can amplify their words and their advice to people. And then others can come in and comment and also kind of seek resources from the site. So going back to quantitative data, if you are a numbers person, here's an example of a story that we told and the screenshot from it. We told this story about Cindy, who works at this sex shop, basically selling lingerie and goodies and stuff like that. I walked in there because I was looking to find a story about sex, sexuality, whatnot. And Cindy and I talked for a while. She's like, I know your site and I have a story for you. She said a while ago, this gentleman came in. He was a little bit older, in his 60s or 70s. He had this really nice suit. He had a cane. He smelled like great cologne. And he said, hey, I'd like to buy a pair of thigh highs, but I only have $5. So Cindy looked at him and she's like, well, they're in the back. Choose the ones you want. It's fine. It's no problem. And they talked for like an hour. And at the end of the hour, the guy said, these are for me, right? She's like, listen, working here, I see everything. You do you. On top of it, like, if I was you, I would get online, find your people, and enjoy your life. She sold the thigh highs to the guy. And months later, a woman came in and she was wearing this beautiful dress and she had a cane and she smelled like really nice perfume. She came up to Cindy and she goes, do you remember me? And Cindy's like, I do. And she said, well, I just wanted to thank you for being so kind to me that day. And I did get online and I did find my people and I'm on my way to go meet them right now. Cindy said she cried afterwards when the person left because she felt like this woman only had so many more years to live out who her authentic self was, right? Clearly, this is a story about LGBTQ identity. When we shared the story, we did it unknowingly the day before National Coming Out Day. People from all over the world saw the post. We don't boost any posts, it's all organic. So you can see what the audience reach was. And you can see from the data, there's one angry person. Who they are, I have no idea. But let's talk about that. People were sharing this on their own site. You can go back to see who was sharing it if it's open. People were using this as conversations to have at their dinner table, which is what we'd like, for the majority of the work to be and to do. Other ways that we've been able to use the work, we take the photos back to the person, give them a copy sometimes, ask if we can put it in a gallery show. We've had multiple exhibitions at different universities, including WashU, in the Duck, like the mess hall. We've also shown at the St. Louis airport and other places like that. This is an example of what an edit looks like. So we'll choose the stories with the photos and then ask whoever we're collaborating with and their team, usually this is one person, to look through it. So we kind of hone it down. And this is an example of our book team that was starting to map out which stories were going to be in our compilation. People also kind of ask, well, how have you made a job out of this? Honestly, I had a lot of questions about what to do with the site as it was growing. So as I was out on the street, kind of having this joint education in classes and then hitting the street to go find stories, there was a ton of overlap between the two. So what I was learning out in the city was informing what I was learning in classes. If we read a report about a particular topic and it sparked some interest, I may have asked somebody about something that then they were able to talk about from a very real experience that they lived in their very real life. And it really just started to complement one thing and then the other. At a certain point, I took a class with a professor named Joe Steensma, and he teaches social entrepreneurship. And we wrestled with this idea of like, what do we do with this fun photo project? Should it be a for-profit, a nonprofit? Eventually we decided to incorporate, become a nonprofit. And right before we did, after Michael Brown was killed, somebody had reached out to us to say, could you provide storytelling for this report that we're putting together to talk about the underlying reasons why Mike Brown happened? And that was a major turning point in the Humans of St. Louis work as well, because we got to tell stories about things like youth at the center, justice for all, and of course, the North Star of everything that's going on, racial equity. Any stories that they decided not to like purchase from us and use for their report, we still shared it on the Humans of St. Louis page anyway. So it was just this massive year of studying, writing reports, doing my internship, but also feeding this report so it was ready to kind of come out. And now that we are a bona fide organization, this is my full-time job out of school. And the way that we're able to raise funds is not only through gallery shows and like selling the artwork, but also from collaborations like Forward Through Ferguson. Another one that came to us is the Regional Arts Commission. They are very supportive of the arts in the community, and they were working on somewhat of an annual report and wanted me to interview these artists about the topics that we had ended up discussing. And another project that I'm really proud to have been able to take on with my team happened through the Missouri Foundation for Health. So it's another organization in town. One of my professors ended up working there. He would come to class, sit on one of the desks, like crisscross applesauce, and just talk to us about the ACA as it was like, going through so many changes that it has and continues to go through. But he made it palatable. And I remember him talking about the work that he does as a policy person at that organization. And I approached him and said, I've done so many stories in St. Louis. I wonder what it would be like to take the work on the road. Through that introduction, he put me in touch with their communication staff, and they just happened to be working on a project where they were trying to get stories of real people, not use stock photography from around St. Louis, from around Missouri. So for about 5 weeks, I would get in my car, do a loop around one part of Missouri where areas are that he had told me, like, these are great to meet people. You want to go to the center of the town and talk to so-and-so. And I used the same techniques that I was using here in St. Louis to interview people. We ended up getting stories about a variety of social work and social justice issues, right? So for this theme, they were looking for stories about people who, if they had fallen through the cracks and needed extra assistance, who and what was there to help them? What was the safety net like? And that included things like churches and Veterans Affairs and housing shelters or food shelters and stuff like that. And literally, I met this person And in 5 minutes, we took this photograph. Mom stepped to the side. She's like, I'd rather not be in it. So we did a portrait of dad with a new baby. Another one that we did was with a bank of all things. But this is really just to show you what the feedback was like as an example of it. So this is fantastic. Can I share this part of your story and link to my local food desert fighters group? Go for it. As long as the information's out there, you're welcome to share. So if I had to kind of put into words some of these things that I learned from the Brown School and that I continue to use every day in my work, this would really be the lessons that I've learned. The first one is be curious. As far as the city's concerned, if you are coming here and you're planning to come here, or you're wondering if it's the right place for you, familiarize yourself with STL history. Knowing the history of this place helps when you start like day one at classes. You will also learn that stuff in your classes, but it will help with your internship. It'll help with your interactions with other people. It'll help to get a better grasp of what St. Louis is about, and not from the lens necessarily of what, CNN or the BBC or NBC has shown from like the comfort of your living room over the years, right? Definitely get familiar with like current events and ask lots of open-ended questions of others. I would say another big thing that allowed me to have a positive experience at the Brown School was knowing that I could count on staff and admin. I always relied on them to help. From the get-go during orientation week, people had said, knock on teachers' doors. Even, however it's done in like the Zoom sphere now, they're open. They want to help you. They want to share. That's why they're there. So if I had questions about practicum, like where do I start? These are my skills. This is my background. What should I be doing? Find the person that you need to, or the people that can help you walk through those questions that you have, because they have connections with people here. And they're very talented at quickly understanding who you are and what your background is to recommend what might be a great fit. And I never felt like anybody at school was telling me, you have to do this, you have to do this. If anything, it was, let us tell you what's available for you. And the other great thing that I experienced at the Brown School is if it doesn't exist, there's a massive chance that you can build it to exist, right? So actually Humans of St. Louis was one of my practicums, like later on in my education, and it was a great fit. I did take a class called System Dynamics, which I'd highly recommend. And the first lesson that the teacher teaches is a system exists in everything. So as we know, with what's going on systemically in the world and with COVID and with this racial social reckoning we're having, a system exists. But I also think about it in the context of like, what do you know? What is it that you don't know? And what is it that you don't even know that you don't know? So keep your mind open when you're at school to say, this is where I'm fitting in here, but there's so much more to the whole story, right? Another huge thing that a lot of my friends and I have talked about is use the time during your education to expand your social circle. Personally, with people at school, with people who are not connected to school. One of the hobbies I love to do is to go salsa dancing, and it keeps me connected with people in the Latino community as well. And then I found that so many Brown School students really enjoy Latin dancing too. So a lot of times you show up and they're there regardless, which is great. But connect with people at school, connect with people out of school, and connect with people professionally so that you can learn the things that you don't know yet going into school. One of the biggest pieces of knowledge that the dean, two deans before Dean McKay was dean, had said during orientation week that I'll never forget is, you're here because we're going to be teaching you the skills that you can use to work with any population. And if you think about that when you're taking your classes, it'll help you to navigate your classes, to grow and like kind of, stretch your social worker muscles as well. So if I would have gone back to Arizona to work with the kids who are still crossing the border, perhaps I know a little bit more to help them, but I decided not to go that route because Humans of St. Louis did keep me here as a job. And I love it. I stayed because of the people. I stayed because of the social network that I built. And I say because there's a lot of great social work to do in St. Louis. But one day, if I decide to go back to work with those kids or another group connected to them or something else, I definitely feel like I have the skills to be able to do that with any population. Of course, there's always going to be more to learn, but the basics of what you're going to learn, your education will provide that for you at the Brown School. Sharing information. The reason I put that on there is because there's so much that's flying in every direction, especially your first semester. Like, who do I talk to about this? Where do I go for that? Be open about the information. Share with others. It's not like yours to keep to yourself, so no one gets the opportunity. Share with other students if you can, and share with other people that you're talking to. And ways to also enjoy your experiences, like make time for non-school commitments. If I didn't take up Carolyn on her offer to say, hey, you want to hit the streets and find stories from people, I would have never fallen into this role at all. And it was like something I wanted to do in school, to not do schoolwork all the time, because there was so much reading and there's so many discussions and there's so much that you have to be accountable for in your curriculum, that to have those moments that fill your heart and your head in other ways, it's really important. And if you make time for it, there's definitely time for it, right? The other thing I can recommend is if you have challenges at school, because challenges will come up inevitably. Personal challenges are going to happen. Societal challenges are always going to be happening, which is like an amazing reason to go to social work school, because you can use this stuff for anything moving forward. But look at them as opportunities. As difficult as they are, definitely get the supports that you need. But think about, where is there a hole and how can I fill it? As opposed to, there's a hole here and I'm personally offended that no one's catering to me, right? That's a huge one. And my friends and I talked a lot about that, who I've graduated with from school. And the ones who enjoyed their experience more are the ones who said, I'm having a problem, but let me try to work through this problem with the help of others. So rely on staff and admin to help you do that too. And then of course, like, I'm the biggest proponent for exploring your city and its surroundings. My previous school, where I went to photography school at, the International Center of Photography, ICP, they'd also say, if your pictures aren't good enough, you're not close enough. And I think about that a lot, not just with my photography, but like through my educational career too. So this is a fun picture I just kind of inserted so y'all could have a laugh. This is graduate level learning, y'all. So in one of our evaluation classes, these were my partners for the project. And we found these kids, and for our presentation ended up recreating the photo and presenting with these on our heads. So you can have a good time there too. It's not all like professional. There's a mix of what you can bring to the table in the form of creativity too, and a little playfulness as well. So on that note, I'll get back to the storytelling and then wrap it up. What do you call a nosy pepper? Jalapeno business. Cute kids. And this is with the mom. Kids are way smarter and pliable than we give them credit for. She was a preemie, 29 weeks, and now she's valedictorian of her kindergarten. So I asked her an open-ended question. What did you do to become valedictorian? She said, I had to work really hard. And I think Michaela is 11 now, actually. I'm in touch with her mom still. The photos that we share don't always have a story that come with them. So when I cruise around the streets here, if you're from here, you know. If you visited here, you know. If you look it up, you see. If you come here, you know, you'll know. But there's a lot of blight in the neighborhood, and it's a visual manifestation of a story, and many stories that have happened and continue to happen around St. Louis. The curiosity is, who wrote that message on there? Who used to live here? Why does the house look like it does? What does it mean for the neighborhood? You go there now, and this part of the building, it's been demolished and taken down. And these weeds, during some years, they grow all the way up and cover it, right? So it's a constantly changing story. But there's so much work that you can do if you decide to insert yourself here, anywhere for that matter. But for St. Louis, just know there's room for you also. How would you feel if we were your age and we were asking you all these questions? What's your favorite color? What was your favoriteest grade? How was it in college? How many classes did you have? Did you even have to be on time? What if you're not on time? What if you're 1 minute late? What if you fake like you're sick and you want to skip something like history class? And then they got me in the gut, you guys. Is this like a job for you, or do you like have any other career that you'd like to get to? I died. And then they said, don't you wish we could go around and interview with you? I think we can go with you, but we probably can't go too far. Maybe down the street and back, right? So our like next generation here. This is from a viewer. St. Louis isn't perfect, but it'll always be home. And these stories make me feel a little bit closer, even if I'm 8,000 miles away. If I had to make a recommendation for some things that I've been looking at, you're welcome to screenshot this. I can also, send a copy to Beth so that you can get your hands on it later. But there's so much to watch, so much to listen to, from like podcasts that are local, videos to really get a sense of St. Louis and its history and current events, things to read to get, which you'll probably have to read anyway if you're going to be going to school here, right? Humans of St. Louis, just for the sake of the presentation. And there's some great Instagram accounts to follow right now, just to get a feel for what the city's like, what people are talking about. And then of course, like walk the parks, hike the trails, kayak the streams, like get to know your surroundings. Just to kind of end, these are some questions that they had asked me to talk about, but I feel like I've probably hit most of them in the presentation. So I'll just go ahead and add to a few of these. My trajectory really shifted between being a student to becoming a professional as I started this project and thought, I'm not ready to leave St. Louis yet. There's more work to be done. I've already started kind of carving out a place for myself. People appreciate it. I feel accepted. And also when I have questions or needs, the Brown School and the city has been great about helping me out with those. And so I continue to do the work that I'm doing. Once our book comes out, I think it's going to be probably a different trajectory for what happens with Hostel. Who knows who's going to ask for storytelling or whatnot. But we're hoping that to be able to have these stories in people's hands and use it as a tool to be able to talk about the issues that the subjects are bringing up will take it to a whole nother level, at least conversation in the city. As a non-native, what kept me here? Definitely the people, 100%. And that's what continues to keep me here. What do I know now about being a Brown School student that I didn't know until I started the program? When I think about that slide that I showed you of looking up St. Louis, and then on Google, it said, here's your sports, here's your weather. That compared to the 3,000 interviews that we've published on Humans of St. Louis, it's so different. And so knowing that in the Brown School, I didn't really quite know what my trajectory was, and it was okay because it worked itself out in the end, and yours will too, in a completely different way than mine, but it will work out. I had no idea. And so every year, and it was a 3-year program for me, going through the program, I just tried to make the best of it and get the most out of it that I could. Take the classes that I was interested in, knock on professors and other teachers and admin's door to get to know them, sometimes even interview them. One thing that was really important to me, since I had worked in Latin America and wanted to continue that connection, was doing an internship abroad. And so around this time of preparing all those stories for the Ferguson Commission report and doing my research and classes at the grad school level, I had to find a practicum, and I was adamant to find an international one. And thank God from taking classes with some of the public health teachers who were very connected in the international community, they made recommendations for what I was able to do. So I did end up going to Peru for 2 months and having an internship there. And it was a Brown School student who had gotten a job there at the clinic I worked at before me. And she really rolled out the red carpet to make it a very smooth, enjoyable transition and visit. I got to go, And then I was editing from like under a bed net on my days off, just being able to share the Humans of St. Louis work with the help of my team who was posting at that time. So like Veras Story that went live, I wasn't there to post it. I was in like a far off area, maybe like 3 hours from Lima in the jungle, working, no internet, had to take like a motorcycle and a bus to be able to get to a coffee shop 1 or 2 days a week to finally see it. But that idea of like relying on different people to be able to make things happen and being able to fulfill all the things that you want during school, I'm just a huge proponent of the fact that like you can make that happen at the Brown School and they'll help you to do that. So I'm going to end my presentation here. At the bottom is my email if you do want to get in touch with me, and my personal webpage as well. But I'm welcome to take any questions, and I hope it's been informative to this point.